All right. Happy Thursday, everyone. And thank you for taking the time out of your valuable day to spend with us unlocking strategies for your workforce engagement program. My name is Owen Robinson, and I'll be your host for this exciting hour. I'm privileged to serve as the Vice President of CX Modernization at Waterfield Tech, your single source for customer and employee experience exceptionalism. I'm really excited to welcome our panelists today, but before I do that, I do want to encourage all of you to jump on the chat and ask questions as we go. We'll try to answer them as we go along, or we do have a bit of time set aside at the end of the session for some Q&A. Our panelists have been very generous in offering some prizes that will go to certain commenters who are eligible. Sorry, Waterfield employees, you are not eligible. So thank you all for joining again today. Enough with the preamble, let's get going. First, I'd like to welcome our panelists and invite them to introduce themselves. Let's start with Daryl Kelly from Alvaria.
Oh, and thank you. Pleasure to be here. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm Daryl Kelly. My friends call me DK, so hopefully by the end of this hour together, we can be friends. I run strategy at Alvaria. I'm a board member and advisor, angel investor, 3 times founder, and a neurodivergent leader. And I always like to say I'm Noah and Olivia's dad. They're up there. It's really what keeps the container of why we do what we do in perspective. So pleasure to be here. And who's next?
All right, Magnus.
All right, so Magnus Gevarts, the Vice President of Product Marketing at Calabrio. I'm based in our Stockholm office in Sweden, so that's where you have the accent. And that's also where we have our Center of Excellence for Workforce Management. Have 25 years in the industry, visited contact centers in over 50 different countries and seen lots of different WFM practices out there. So looking forward to discussing that with you today, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Magnus. And I think everybody has an accent except me, so that's how we'll roll. So Robert from Genesys, tell us about yourself.
Hey, everybody. Robert Beasley. I'm the Global Head of Pre-Sales here at Genesys. I am from Tennessee, live in the Atlanta, Georgia area. That explains my accent. I have about 6 kids, and I can't fit all their pictures behind me. There's too many. But been in this space a long time, and I've worked with a number of the folks on this panel and the group of attendees here. So really look forward to discussing a topic that's near and dear to my heart.
Thanks, Robert. And I'm still trying to process about 6 kids, but Trent from Verint.
Hi, hey everybody. Thank you guys for joining today. Real pleasure to be with you. My name is Trent Isaacs. I am part of our go-to-market strategy group at Verint. My focus is been largely in the analytics and real-time space, generative AI stuff, desktop process analytics, performance management. Been with Verint for about 15 years, and prior to that, had a long career running centers myself. So this subject that we're tackling today is also very near and dear to me. So looking forward to a good conversation today.
All right, welcome, gentlemen. And as we say in the South where I'm from, I can't wait to pick all y'all's brains. But let's start with this. In the age of automation, and we've been doing automating and creating self-service application and really creating an environment where people can serve themselves for many, many years. But in the age of generative AI, it feels like we're almost reaching a point where we could automate everything. Is that true? And if it is, why are companies why should they and how could they continue to invest in their human agents? Daryl, let's start with you.
Sure. I feel like we've been talking about generative AI all year and various use cases, and I'm glad that we're actually spending time to define it and make it practical for for this audience, but specifically the enterprises and mid-market businesses and SMB businesses that depend on our organizations every single day. Because I think we've seen it more as a fear because it's something that we truly don't know. We don't fully understand at this moment in a meaningful way. We focus on here at Alvaria, and just as an overall thesis, is generative AI should be complementary and help empower a more what I would call efficient, productive and engaged workforce instead of over-indexing towards efficiency and compliance, which we've been doing for the last 50 years of workforce management. Is we've over-indexed on efficiency and compliance, and now we can actually at scale with generative AI pull productivity and engagement into the entire equation to deliver, what I'm calling customer experience at scale, right? Modern customer experience at scale. So it should be something that is seen, generative AI should be something that is seen very complementary to agents in terms of how we get to more productivity and engagement at scale. It's the great and that the way that I would define generative AI use cases in the market today.
Good point. Magnus, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it's either or. Basically, I think we need to do both. And like you said, we've been doing automation for a long time. There will be really, really strong automation coming out from generative AI as well. But typically what has happened in the past is that this drives complexity into the in-person conversations. So then we need to have competent staff and tooling to help agents excel in what they do, and also have them stay longer, so we can nurture that competence and use it as an asset for our companies.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Robert, what are you seeing?
Yeah, the thing that gets me the most excited when I start thinking about generative AI and what it's going to do to the contact center industry as a whole, especially at the employee level, is remove this notion of all the tools we have, right? The problem we have is that there's a million tools, and there has been for the last 20 to 30 years. And I think it's kind of a shame. I can't stand it actually when I'm spending time with customers and I look at an agent's dashboard and they pull up an Octatile or something similar and there's 40 tools on it. The nice thing about something like generative AI is it should be able to not only, make your employees, give your employees an opportunity to present themselves as smarter, stronger, faster. But as an employee, I don't need to know how many integrations sit behind the scenes. I don't even need to know that this tool is served up by this vendor or that vendor or this vendor. You're being served up an experience that's making me more efficient with customers, making me more efficient with my own team as peers, supervisors, team leaders. And generative AI is serving up those types of things, whether it be something as simple as a knowledge assist or directionally pointing me to something, or the prospect even of taking something like an old traditional desktop analytics trigger, and instead of saying I've got to build 20 manual screenshots and put all these triggers over the top of them, let generative AI go, hey, we just heard the customer say, I need to take your credit card. Let me fire a pause right there, right? Like there's all this world of things that can be opened up. But I think being able to keep it from being a list of tools and features in front of an employee is what's going to make it, really take us to the next level.
Spot on. And Trent, as you bring up the tail end of this part of the conversation, we have a question from the audience from Tanya. Can someone define what AI is? So if you want to take a stab at that.
Tricky thing. So AI has been a well-used term, but with caution. AI can be kind of used like Kleenex, and everything can become Kleenex if you use the same word to describe everything. But I mean, if you think about what artificial intelligence in all of its forms is there to do, taking a look, as Robert was talking about, and I love what Daryl said as well about, trying to make things easier for a person in the moment to get through a wide patch of content. This is the generative AI flavor. So if you have a whole lot of things that they have available to them to choose from, artificial intelligence applied to that can say, what's the most relevant piece of this that I should present now? So I tend to think of what AI can do algorithmically in all forms in WEM as automating pieces of complex work or making content more readily available to a person. So if you think about the science of that, it's very good at categorizing things. It's very good at understanding intent from what I say to what should be recalled. And there's so many uses for that. And Gen AI is the lightning strike. And I'm sure everybody that's on this panel and on these in this conversation today has had some form of exposure to things like OpenAI. Whether you just used it to try to write a talk track for a slide, or you've used it to write lyrics to a song. There's lots of things that you can do with it. And we are all at the point right now, we're trying to figure out the best applications of that for business. And when I think about the question that you asked about augmenting human performance and why is it so important to invest in people versus just a blanket automation of something, I think in the end, customers have been trained that the way that we serve them today should be omnipresent, and it should be 24 hours. We give them authority to do certain things for themselves, and we automate them and contain them and let them do the things that they want to do, whether it's 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon. But when things get heavy, when things get complicated or risky, or if they have a lot of consequence, there's still a lot of preference in the consumer space to say, I'd like to talk to a person. I want to hear a voice work with me on this. And from the simplest way I can think about it is, if I think about the men and women that are sitting out there today in your agent seats, they eat every bit of the change that we put in front of them. They're responsible for it all. And at the same time, they're supposed to be the world's greatest ambassadors for customer experience. They're supposed to be intelligent, know the products, know the services down to the ground, be able to answer quickly and get things done effectively. If you don't invest in their ability to get what they need while the bullets are flying and while they're actually speaking to people, there will be a level of compromising that happens in how a customer feels on that I know none of us want. And I think that now is the time to really consider what we do to make their jobs as easy as possible while still keeping pace with the speed of change that I know everybody on this call is going through.
All right. Now you're spot on, Trent, and thank you for that. And indeed, I mean, humans still matter and always will. And I know from my own perspective, when, like as you said, when things get hairy, it's not necessarily just about solving the problem. It's about knowing that somebody at the company I'm talking to has empathy for my situation, can express that. And that's something only one human can do to another truly effectively. So, so I do think
may I add to
absolutely jump on,
as Trent was talking, that I think, Trent, you made a lot of really, really meaningful points, because I think that's the question that most people are asking if you're really vulnerable is, what is this thing called AI? And, we're fortunate enough because we've been in the industry, we've been on the forefront of it. And so I think we kind of, we take for granted what we are exposed to as technologists, specifically large enterprise technologists. And, I was describing it to my child, and that's, how I like to try to put things in boxes, not saying that we're all children and things have to be super simple to consume. But, one thing that I think is really important for us to have as a takeaway, and Trent, you got me on this tangent here, is AI is just large computation at scale, right? It's being able to take mass amounts of data, structured and unstructured data, and making sense of that data in a meaningful way. The applications, our use cases, require us as leaders and also enterprises to be creative as it relates to how can we use this in a complementary manner. I worked in the BPO for a very long time, very, very large BPO. An agent's job today is an impossible job. I think we should just, have a moment of silence for what agents actually do day over day. Like when we look at workforce management systems, we look at CCAS systems, we look at CCI, they're the little dots, right? They're the assets, right? But they're humans, right? And the cognitive load that these humans have day over day over day over day. And then on top of that, they have life that's happening around them. They have kids, when you're working at home, you've got kids out there, you have all the demands that's happening. AI, specifically generative AI, can help reduce that cognitive demand. So instead of just seeing these employees and employees' days as fixed boxes of manic chaos, right? You can introduce relief into that manic chaos with generative AI and AI technology, specifically in today's use cases, by focusing on taking that rich amount of data, the large enterprise data, the compliance data that we have, the coaching data that we have, the contextual data about a customer, and making it consumable that reduces cognitive fluency. So you're not just looking at your agent as an agent, or not just an agent or just an asset, but they really can become brand advocates when you help reduce some of that cognitive load for some of those components of them just consuming that information, and they get to focus on what's most important, which is delivering an exceptional experience to that to that consumer in a really meaningful way. And again, at scale, right? You have brand advocacy at scale. Sorry, I was a little tangential there, but I think
not at all.
Really good.
No, I think it's
okay,
a great
we're friends
point.
now. Just saying, we're friends now.
and I really think, where generative AI has taken that lightning strike is it's moving from the processing of big data, which was more traditional AI and whatnot, to the novel decisioning with that data, which is something that used to be the exclusive domain of humans. And I think as we decide where and when it makes sense to apply generative AI in our systems, in our customer experiences and in our employee experiences, becomes really challenging, because it's not just about delivering the experience. That's a big part of it, but it's also about who gets to make the decision and why. And to your point, there's all those other inputs into the human experience that are really hard to replicate in even the best generative AI technologies. So, really great points, guys.
So then,
But,
Owen, we should answer what generative AI is as well, because I'm not looking at the questions, but I think it's important because we went right into generative AI, and I think to that lens of you have AI, then generative. I mean, maybe that is something we could spend some time on, because it is different, right? In terms of long streams of coherent output, right? It's about the output that's being generated. So I think, sorry, I don't want to take over, but I just think it's important because we talk about AI, but then we don't actually go the layer deeper. And I think it's, it's our responsibility as panelists here to maybe take it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, Daryl, you're right. And I think we're probably victim of the fact that we do live and breathe in this much of the time, and sometimes need to take a step back. So that's a really great point. So let's go back to Magnus, because you haven't spoken in a minute. Jump in. How do you define generative AI versus, I'll call it, old school AI?
Yeah, old school. But so generative AI is part of the AI family. And what's special about generative AI is that it generates new information or new pictures, new videos. It generates something new from existing information. We talked about other types of AI like machine learning, which is basically statistical methods just using so many more parameters to arrive to automation, for example. But generative AI, and I think with OpenAI and ChatGPT, for example, that has really shown the power of AI and how you can generate new information from a lot of data.
Yep, spot on. Anyone add on to that?
It's a good definition. The interesting thing is what gets generated is pretty amazing, but the interesting thing is what do you do with it from a business perspective? What's getting generated? And there's so many use cases that are being explored right now. And I'm going to stop right there. I think the question of the day just popped into the chat. Do we think that AI will be replacing jobs? I heard a great quote from somebody once that said, managers will not be replaced by AI. Employees will not be replaced by AI, but managers and employees that use AI might replace those that don't.
It's a good way to think about it. Yeah, really great way.
It's a boost, right? It's a boost to all of our effectiveness. So when I look at how I'm seeing our customers exploring the uses of Gen AI, they're looking at things like, what could I do with, say, the transcript of an interaction? Could I use generative AI to take a 10-minute transcription and create in an automated fashion summarization notes that could be published to a CRM? Could I use generative AI to take the content of what happens on a call and use it to trigger the creation of forms or sort of RPA sort of use cases? Could I use Gen AI to, unpack the mysteries of how we create knowledge content? Or how do we summarize a 27 exchange email thread between a customer and our business in a way that makes best sense for someone to use? And every one of those things has something in common, and it really is to make the next person's job or the person that's currently doing the job's life easier in getting that done. So when Magnus was talking about it doing a creation of a new asset, the idea there to me is it's giving me something, particularly to a call center agent, it's giving me something I wouldn't have had without it, and I can do something faster with it and probably more accurately with it. DK, again, I think your ask there to kind of unpack that mystery a little bit was right on point.
Well, and I would say too, it's not that it's replacing jobs; it's actually creating better jobs that people want, that are a lot more attractive. Years and years of people being agents where they would switch jobs in a heartbeat for 50 cents an hour to go across the street to do the exact same job with the exact same problematic tools, those days are moving on, in large part because we've not only gone virtual with Zoom and Teams and tools like that. It allows people to expand where they can look for employment, but it also lets our agents, our employees, be a lot more selective about what they want to do. Whereas before, they kind of had to accept whatever was sitting in their in their immediate vicinity. And so now they can go, I want to work at a place that gives me these tools. I want to work at a place that considers the value of not only machine learning types of AI technology, but generative AI. They want to be able to go to a place that has a voice. They're looking at places like Glassdoor online, and they're looking at reviews of what their peers are saying and going, man, this sounds like the same place I was before, or this sounds like a place that I'm excited to go and work at. And not only at the employee level, I think a big part of the problem that has existed for employees, call center agents for the last decade has actually been WFM planners, quality analysts, coaches, because they live in their own vacuum. And the amount of times that folks like myself and Trent and Magnus and DK have talked to people and said there's value in looking at all these things together, and not only looking at them together, but now being able to let generative AI go through and say, hey, you don't need to go and put out a CSI party to spend 5 hours doing research on why we tanked the service level at 10 o'clock. It's surfaced it. And not only has it surfaced it from your traditional WFM statistics, it's saying, hey, by the way, from a speech standpoint, look at the 3 things that were trending during this time that seem like outliers. Or, hey, we noticed something going on, and AI is saying, you need to send some coaching to this person or some learning to that. Like, bringing it all together and letting AI be the common thread that says, here's what we need to see. It's making the WFM person, who used to kind of care less about what the quality person was doing, it's making them talk, and it's making them work together. And because those folks are working together, they're giving a tremendously better experience to the employees who are having to deal with the technology that those folks are administrating.
Plus, the other thing, if I can add on to what Robert's talking about, the one thing that doesn't get talked a lot about with generative AI, people ask the question, is it going to replace jobs? But very rarely do people ask, what jobs is it creating? So when I think about all the last like 10, 15 years that we've trained people that have an analytical skill set to do things like build queries and categories to go and attack the mystery of what happens in unstructured conversational data. I met 2 people. I was flying back from an event in the airport lounge. Both of them, I would guess, were probably about 25 years old. Now, by the gray on my face, you can probably guess that most people look like they're about 25 years old to me. But they both now are Gen AI prompt engineers. So as a step of getting anything to come from this, someone has to write the prompt to say, this is what I want you to do. And that is a very nuanced job. So they started by doing, data management, query composition, and a bunch of other like traditional analytics jobs. And then they had, GPT in front of them, and they needed to write the right questions to get the right answers back. And now all of a sudden, these 2 have more than doubled their income, and they have a job that didn't exist a year ago. It's pretty amazing how fast this is moving.
Well, and to that point of prompt engineers and job creation, because I'm glad we're talking about this, because every new technological revolution, there's always fear. And then you get to the other side and you're like, oh, well, having electricity is actually pretty exceptional, right? I mean, and that's what I imagine we're going to see on the other side of this, because what we don't talk enough about in the industry, there's these rich papers that are 70, 85 pages long, and, it's nerds like us that are going and reading it, but it's not the broader industry that's actually consuming the information. And so there is a big dissonance between the understanding of how these models and how generative AI is materialized in a meaningful way. And, we say, oh man, OpenAI, it's one of the most efficient companies in the planet because there are 55 employees and the revenue per FTE is just so high. There is an army of individuals that are tuning the models in a meaningful way to try to tune out bias. And so when you think about large language models off of public internet, there's a smaller language model or even a large language model that is going to be distinct to each individual organization. And you want those models to be tuned in a way that reflects your culture. And that's your people, right? That are helping build bias and conditioning and heuristics that are reflective of your organization. That's that human in the loop. That's that net new job creation that's saying, wait, hold on, we actually don't answer that way. That's not our tone of voice. That's not our style. That's the type of consistency that we want. That's actually not how we engage with agents or whatever that may be. These are really important roles that, again, you're going to hear me say this a lot, that we don't talk enough about, because we over-index to the large language model called the internet. And we all have, and I'm going to go back 15, 20 years, and we all have intranets, right? We have large data, we have large containers about what makes a brand, a unique brand, right? Coca-Cola is distinctly Coca-Cola. Well, how do you continue to reinforce Coca-Cola at scale in this large AI world? Those are going to be jobs that help protect that.
Right. And I think as we really think about AI and generative AI and its implementation, this new evolution, you all bring up great points in that the technology we use, they are tools. They are tools we're using to improve the overall human condition and human experience that we're leveraging across a lot of different things. So generative AI is so I think important in the evolution of technology right now because of all the use cases well beyond what we're talking about today, but into things like farming and electricity manufacturing and all the other businesses and things that make our lives better. It's another tool out there to leverage properly that creates an entire industry behind it to support it, to leverage it in those appropriate use cases throughout all sorts of industries. Really great discussion, guys. I'm going to move us a little bit, and Dimitri has a fantastic question that I'm going to save for the Q&A. So I'm going to put a pin in that one. We'll come back to that, Dimitri. But before we get there, I do want to back up a little bit and ask Angela, our digital manager, to throw up a poll for the audience here. Because I think as we talk about the technology and all the tools we have available, we are trying to address challenges and things that are happening in all of your lives every day that you're trying to address. So let's get a feel for kind of what are the top challenges you're seeing out there with people. One thing I see, one thing I hear a lot is the difficulty in recruiting and retaining talent. And of course, that's been around a while, but where it's become particularly acute is in the supervisor and manager layer of contact centers and customer experience environments. And it's accelerating the problem because people join companies, they quit bad bosses. So having that layer of bad bosses in there is exacerbating a problem they already had. I'm hearing that a lot lately, but I'd love to hear from our panel. Robert, what are you hearing?
So I'm trying to move the challenges off my my mute button. The biggest thing for me that I'm hearing is you've got people who are just simply overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed with everything that's sitting in front of them. The amount of tools, the amount of integrations. When one thing breaks, if it's touching 4 other things, is one of them going to break? Now, can I not do my job as efficiently? What should be taking 5 minutes is now taking 30. So when people are looking at the challenges that are facing their org, as well as the challenges that they're seeing when they're trying to decide where to go work, they're looking at places that continue to be, I don't want to say cutting edge because I think we're all there. They're looking at places that give them a feeling of not only do I want to work here, but my voice is heard. I'm being listened to, I can do my job, and I can do it in a way that, look, every job's going to have its stress, but when I leave that job, I'm not taking it with me. And the other thing we have to consider when you start looking at these challenges is we're looking at a workforce where there's 4, sometimes 5 different generations of different types of worker who are coming in, and they all have their own heartburn. What gives me heartburn versus someone who's coming fresh out of college and the heartburn they have is completely different. And also the way we work with tools is completely different. I've got a junior in college who's using generative AI right now as a way to verify code that he's developing, as opposed to, I think back to when I started looking at COBOL, having to go through and run a bunch of checker engines. It's just different. It's a different world. And so you have people that are used to it. You have people that are learning it. You have people that have said, I'm never going to learn this. So you have to, as a company, balance not only the things that are challenging all these people, but what's the common denominator that we can focus on, because you're not going to be able to solve this problem for everybody, but you can do a pretty darn good job.
Yeah, no doubt. Daryl, what are you seeing?
Everything, right? I mean, these are all, I mean, it's
That,
actually
you can't say everything. You've got to
but
be selective.
these are all right. When you look at it, these are all symptoms. And I really do like where you're going, Robert, with kind of the overall concept here is this need of this. It all goes back to Maslow's need hierarchy of needs. At the end of the day, we want to find in our work, right? We want to find purpose and belonging and safety and security. And so when you look at everything here, this is just it's a symptom of key root causes. And it's what I'm excited that generative AI and AI can help solve is giving the tools in real time to a workforce that is overworked, overburdened. They're filtering more information than they ever have before. And that's an entire customer experience organization, from supervisors to managers. So yes, I'm likely seeing, burnout and stress probably one of the as one of the key key talking points from customers that we're talking about, but all of them are kind of driven from each of these individual pieces, right? Staffing and shortages, communication and collaboration challenges, training and development, reward and recognition. There's just not enough time to do all of the pieces that lead up to the root, to the symptom, essentially, of burnout and stress. I'm out, I'm disengaged. Mm-hmm. And generative AI is the great normalizer to all of these things in a meaningful way. From a meaningful way. I'm going to hop off my tangent there because I'd go on for 20 more minutes. Censor myself.
No, you're spot on. And as we see the results of the poll from the audience here today, we're hearing the same things out there. Trent, I mean, does this confirm what you're seeing?
It does. I feel like we're at sort of a generational influx of change, of not just about how work gets done, but how people feel about doing the work. Mm-hmm. So in my days of running centers, I would often drive home wondering what I could have done better to help a person feel more confident in what they did, because everybody wants to feel, as DK said, a lot of security and confidence and safety, mm-hmm. in that they're doing their job at a spot that's not going to put their future earnings at risk. And when I talk to younger leaders in call centers today, people that have been in the role for, let's say, 5 to 10 years, something like that, they've moved up to the ranks, and they're now holding the careers and livelihoods of all these thousands of people across a network of centers in their hands. It all comes back down to a very human need, and that is, I want to work in a place where I feel like I'm going to be competent in what I do, and I'm going to be supported in the places where I'm not. And that changes everything about, mm-hmm. what our responsibility is and how we manage it. I'm going to take it away from tech for a minute. I mean, mm-hmm. This is just about how you deal with somebody's need to get stronger in how they perform. People, I saw the burnout and stress categories. The talent acquisition is a real need. It's been one for us in call centers forever. I mean, no one's ever going to bed feeling a lot of safety about what's going to happen with tomorrow's shrinkage or the attrition rates, or what's going to happen with my best people taking a job someplace else. The way to fight it is to pivot a little bit. And I think we're in a spot that we can actually do that now, because we've proven since 2020, when lockdowns happened and COVID hit us, that agents do quite well in many regards when they're working hybrid or they're working remote. It can be a little lonely, and it certainly gives us challenges from a leadership perspective, but they have less interruptions and they can concentrate more fully on what they're doing with customers every minute of every day. So I think the way that we fight burnout, stress, and attrition comes back down to speeding proficiency. If we can make people smarter, faster, let them deliver better results, maybe we reduce a little bit of what we're thinking about from the 12.6 million metrics we have on their heads every day, and only focus on the ones that really matter. We're doing something to stand with them as they learn. And I think that's going to be really, really critical. Right. And I saw a note, someone just said being short-staffed causes burnout. That is an absolute fact.
Yep. Magnus, what are you seeing?
I want to add something. Let Magnus go first, please.
So I completely agree with you, Trent. It's so much a leadership challenge, and it's something we have to address together with often soft issues as well. Of course, technology can help, but that's not the only solution to this. So it's how we lead people in our contact centers. We actually surveyed a number of agents to find out what they think, and they pointed at facts like burnout and stress on that chart. 96% of those agents surveyed, they said they are acutely stressed at least once per week. That's an industry problem, with a health problem for us, and that needs to be addressed. They pointed out training and development as one of the key things they wanted improved. And then, of course, all of us, we have technology that we could provide, but it's very much about the management of the contact center to get the right things in the hands of their people. And maybe most of all, what they pointed out, if they could choose one thing, except salary increase, that would make their life better, it would be flexibility. And this is flexibility and when and where they work. So be able to work from home, as we learned to do during COVID, being able to have that flexibility. And the other one, to be able to choose when to work. So plan my work around my life and not the other way around.
Right.
Well said.
I think a lot of it comes back to the same points, that technology aside and all the great tools we have available today, people work for people, managers manage, leaders lead. And if you don't have those in your organization, you're going to face attrition and recruitment issues, irrespective of the technology you're using to support that workforce. Robert, I thought you had a point here.
I did, but I can actually take this question from Chad, and it'll kind of dovetail in quite nicely. So, Chad asked, do you find that supervisors who are working from home are burning out at a higher rate due to not being able to separate work from home life? Short answer, yes. The long answer, and again, it kind of builds off the last response, but I think goes nicely into this. When you think about that burnout and stress, the sad fact is most of us, you, your vendor, your relationship, we're creating a lot of that burnout, because what are we doing? We're taking a lot of the simple problems, the easy things that are, that normally would have come into the contact center, and we're letting those get handled in a digital means. And so what's left on the employee's shoulder is the most complicated stuff, the challenging stuff that maybe hasn't ever been answered before. And that's why it can't be self-served. So what's happening is you're creating this burnout on these employees, because you're giving them, instead of having a little bit of a lull in the day where they can get a couple of easy things that make them feel good, they're getting just an onslaught of back-to-back complex challenges, complex problems, complex issues. And so then when they need help and they go to the supervisor, the supervisors are now getting hit with that same complex thing. And I've heard from a number of folks that their supervisors are struggling to be able to answer things as quickly as they had in the past. That's part. If you think about many of these supervisors' employees, they started as agents. And one of the things that got them there was they were great at being agents. And now the thing that they should be able to help them with the easiest is the stuff that they were handling as an employee. And now, again, complex, complicated problems that there may not have been a blueprint for how to get that answer to. So we are creating a world where we're giving them more complex stuff, which is creating more burnout and stress, which is why you see such a lean into other tools, whether that's pushes from Thrive or, hey, take a minute to breathe, or you're finding people trying to bring a little bit of levity to the workplace, just so folks can take a minute and decompress, because it's just going to get more and more complicated the more stuff people are able to self-serve. And I think that drives a lot of that.
Right. And I do think the thoughtful evolution of your KPIs is really important here. As you build self-service and digitize the easy transactions, the supervisor said, back in my day, I took 70 calls a day and my average hold time, average handle time was 2.5 minutes. That's not a relevant stat anymore, because you're taking a different mix of calls that are different.
Literally doesn't matter anymore. It becomes irrelevant in some regard, right?
Completely does. And, and really, I do want to thank the audience for participating in the poll, and I'm going to impose on you one more time and put one more poll up, and ask our panel, what are you seeing from a technology use and adoption perspective, as we get back to the technology a little bit? what are you seeing out there as top concerns in terms of, I've got this great technology, or I want to use this great technology, but I've got some challenges. What are you hearing out there?
So it kind of ties neatly into something I just saw pop in the chat about hesitation and the adoption of AI as an example. So what I hear a lot of is that technical adoption or evolution of a platform has a lot of fear around it. So if we had something that's been working for a long time, even if the future offers you something that's more powerful and more flexible and more appropriate to do the job at hand, people will often vote against their own self-interest in favor of staying where it's safe. I don't need to like take on an IT project to handle this. We've been doing this manually. We've been doing this in another way for a while. We can limp along. So anytime that you're talking about switching things in a big platform like WEM, there's technical concerns, there's security concerns, there's adoption concerns, there is disruption concerns, there are reporting concerns, there's customization complexity concerns, there's all sorts of things that hit you. And if we're all honest about it, when we're faced with a big decision, when it sounds hard, we will take the easier path. We'll say we'll stick in a way that goes. So I see a lot of wrestling, and that doesn't even touch the move to migrate from on-premise solutions to cloud solutions, which is a danger. And some people are worried that it's going to be a disruptor, or it's going to be more expensive, or it's going to compromise their control of things. So all of these decisions are weighty, and it takes a lot of consideration to decide which path to take. But the clock is ticking, and we all know it. We know that customers are demanding things, the business is demanding things, agents are demanding things. We got to serve them all, but we only have so much time and so many resources, so much budget to do it. So
fear is such a powerful
sorry,
motivator.
Owen, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, fear is such a powerful motivator, and we see it in some of our questions today. I don't know what this new technology is. Is it going to replace my job? What does it do to me? And it's a really strong inhibitor to adopting new things, and always has been. But there are ways to get through it. There are some of us who've been there before, so hopefully we get there. But
the two best questions before you move on, the two best questions I had someone ask me recently were, why does this matter? Whatever application we were talking about or technical tool we were talking about, why does it matter? And the second question was, what does it mean to me? How does it make my life personally better at affecting what I can do for the people around me?
Right.
Well, so okay, this is where I'm super passionate, and I mean my background's in organizational psychology. That's what my master's in kind of overall thesis. I obsess about some of these components, which we're talking about right now. And at the end of the day, it's change management. And what happens in the contact center is the contact center, unfortunately, sits on an island, right? And we've got to start doing a better job of both full organizational, vertical, and horizontal integration as we solve these problems, right? IT, to Trent, what you were saying, each constituent has a different fear, each constituent has a different need, and yet we solve them in isolation throughout the enterprise, and so of course there's not going to be adoption when you as the contact center who has been spending time and okay, how do we apply Gen AI, how do we apply AI in different use cases, and then we expect IT to just come along with us when they have their security and they have privacy concerns. When we start change management initiatives, we need to do a better job, and this is what Waterfield does well, is just a little Waterfield plug of coming around the problem together as early in the problem identification process as possible, so everyone can feel as if they have a voice at the table, because that one person that you leave out of having the voice at the table is going to be your limiting factor, and then chain link theory happens, and then nothing moves forward, because you're going to have a pretty even split, I imagine, on that poll result. It's going to be all of those things, right? Depending on who's on this call, right? If you had a completely different set of users on this call, it would change. And that's what's important, is you need to make sure everyone is at the table as it relates to the transformation that is happening with our employees at the end of the day and our brand experience, right? customer experience is one-to-one associated with brand experience, and your people experience is one-to-one associated to your brand experience as well. And yet, how often do you see CMOs and chief people officers and chief digital officers and chief operating officers really in a room together working on one singular strategy that is pushed down the entire organization? It's the contact center people that go, well, we need all this help and we have to do these things and we need Gen AI and then you have everyone else in the organization's like, what are you talking about? You know, we've got the chatbot on the website that seems to be
Right.
And so it's about coming together in a collective and solving those problems as early as possible before we already have an idea of what we want to move forward with.
I love the image of the call center as an island, and understanding that that island is storm ridden. There's always something changing. There's always something pounding
Palm
the shore.
trees whipping around, coconuts everywhere. We
great
don't know
image.
what's going on. Robert, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I thrown my hand up because I wanted to kind of come back to the one thing in the question that that we kind of didn't hit directly, which is specifically from a WFM perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Heard all of us talk about WEM. I think it's important that everyone realize that as an industry, we are moving away from oh, it's WFM, oh, it's QM. We are looking at it through the lens of WEM and how these things interplay together. And we're trying to give our customers this the understanding that just taking one thing, because that's all you can afford in your budget now, isn't the best experience. We're trying to give you this all-in-one experience. But when I look at the question, which was, are the top concerns of your organization from a WFM perspective, I can say that the WFM folks that I have met with for the last 3 years, 2 years in particular, as you think about, there's been a huge cloud boom in the last years. They're the ones with the biggest fear of change. They're the ones that, you know, hey, I've pulled this lever on Thursday for the last 12 years, and I just have to pull this lever every Thursday. Why? That's just what I do. Like they're so afraid to walk away from that lever. And so when you start talking about them, about the value of, why do you have to manually run a forecast in Excel? We can compute this thing 10,000 times a day, and it's always there and waiting for you. Next week, when I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do on Wednesday, I don't go to the weather forecast and have to put in 15 inputs. It already has them and goes, we expect it to be 70. Yeah, that might change, but based on all the data available, pretty darn confident it's going to be 70, right? But yet we've got this mindset that we've got to put a billion rows and columns together just to say, all right, now we're good. Now let me import it because seasonal factors are like, from a WFM specific perspective, that's a group that used to be the ones driving all of the change in the contact center. As the WFM team made decisions, everyone else sort of followed. And I'm actually seeing the inverse of that, which is now people that are making decisions around quality and speech and performance. They're kind of pulling the WFM folks along. Not always, and it's not always the right thing to do, but it is a weird dichotomy of change that I thought was worthwhile to discuss, simply because this is a WFM perspective question.
Yeah, you're spot on, and thanks for bringing us back to back to earth, Robert. Magnus, any thoughts on that?
No, so I absolutely agree with Daryl there with change, the importance of change management, of course. Overall, in the end, you shouldn't change just because of change sake. You have to think, is it worth the change? And there will be bumps along the road, right? So but what is really compelling for many customers is that it has so many things have changed around their contact centers. So customer patterns have changed, new channels. We talked about employees earlier and their new demands on us. All of that together means that you have to change even within your existing applications. So does it work to do that, or is it easier to go to a new, more modern workforce management solution in this case?
Right. And it's a great point. We should never do change for change's sake, but we do have to adapt to what's happening around us. You can't stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening, because it is. The world is moving really fast. Looking at the clock, and I know we're getting to near the end, I want to make sure we cover off on a couple more things and then grab into Q&A. We've talked about a lot of the challenges here. I want to give each of you a couple minutes, just talk about what your organization is doing, what your company is doing to address some of the challenges we've talked about today. I'll say from my perspective, from Waterfield Tech's perspective, we think each of our panelist companies produces really fantastic technology. And as a nerd myself, love to geek out on all the cool stuff we can do today. But none of that matters if it's not applied correctly, using proper change management, embracing the organization as a whole to deliver a meaningful business outcome. And really, that's where the metal meets the meat. And that's where Waterfield stands with our customers to deliver those exceptional experiences that their customers and their employees deserve. But I'd love to hear, let's start with Daryl. What are you doing over at Alvaria that's really making a difference?
So, technology aside, one of the main things that we're doing at Alvaria, and I could reach to the phone and come hug you, Robert, because I think it's really important, is we're thinking about this thing that we call WFM, WEM completely different right now, because it is needing to be one integrated thing, right? For, since 2017, when, we know Gartner kind of took WFM and quality, called it WFO, and then WEM became a thing. They're still mostly fragmented platforms in the contact center today, right? Each of our brands has, a variety of different platforms, different use cases as it relates to the way that an enterprise will consume it. And so one of the big questions that sits on a whiteboard is one platform, one use case, one persona, and that persona is the contact center at the end of the day. And of course, there's sub personas, and you want to make sure that the technology delivers on for each of those personas, but in one UI. Because when you think about the way in which you really make things applicable in today's modern world, it all starts with the data that sits underneath it as well, right? Where everything that we're talking about with generative AI, machine learning, AI as a whole, your limiting factor will always be the data that sits underneath. And if you have performance over here, and you've got quality over here, you've got knowledge base over here, you've got your employee lifecycle over here, you've got your HCM tools over here, your ITSM over here, and then your WFM over here, we're challenging our thinking, our customers' thinking, and the way that we bring products to market in a meaningful way, where all of those things aren't seen as individual islands. You'll see this island analogy a lot. We have to bring it to centralization, because in that centralization, it's going to lead to the application that Robert was talking about, where you're just checking the weather, right? And that goes the same for the workforce admin, to the supervisor, to the employee, right? So we're imagining and emerging things forward where, an agent walks into the day and they can see their performance from the last day, and they go, oh man, I want to go work on these few things. And then there's some learning that's already built into their day that's based off of their actual needs. From a supervisor point of view, hey, it looks like Trent, who was at home, had a really, really tough day, it started really high sentiment, or it started really low sentiment, and it continued to stay low. You may want to go do a check-in on them. Here's some things that worked really well. Here's some things that they struggled with respectively. On the workforce management side, right? They just want to come in and do a really good job as it relates to how they manage, this rich amount of volumetric data that's moving from primarily voice to now multi-channel data. And they want to do that in an effective way that informs the contact center, but then also informs your recruiting and onboarding strategy. And so for us, it's about bringing that all together in a meaningful way to allow the enterprise, mid-market, and SMB consumption to be greater. The second thing that we're focusing on is and I'm sorry, I'm going to get off this, is we're obsessed about the human-machine interface. It's called some initiative that we have internally, is beautiful, intuitive, and intelligent initiatives, because yes, change management has to happen from an organization point of view, but change management also has to happen from the technology and the tools that help drive that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Daryl. And obviously, anybody in the audience wants to learn more about Alvaria, reach out to Daryl after this. I think he will tell you all you need to know. Magnus, tell us a little bit about what Calabrio is doing.
Sure, thank you. So focusing on employee empowerment, that's really our core focus. So I talked earlier about giving employees autonomy, so freedom to choose when and where to work. And we've come quite far with that, and see really great adoption on our self-scheduling tools, where you allow employees to form their schedule themselves. Maybe have a lunch break with a colleague, or start earlier, start later, etc. Still with the control mechanisms that's needed for the central resource planning department. So I think continuing down that path, and also providing improved coaching tools to agents, because I think the agents is still going to be really, really important for contact centers in the future. I'll stop there.
There's so much, I know. Robert, I know Genesys has been doing WFM and whatnot for a long time, but has really invested in this effort recently. What's different?
Well, we're investing in WEM as a whole, of which WFM is just a part. I think the big thing for us that we continue to focus on now, as well as continue to drive for in the future, is it's our goal to give our customers the ability to consume everything. We also know that they can't consume everything all at once, but gone are the days where, look, if someone sits across from me in a sales conversation and says, I have to have Verint, I'm going to explain, no offense, Trent, but we're friends, so I'll pick on you. If they say I have to have Verint, I'm going to tell them why I think Genesys is the right approach. But at the end of the day, if they go, that's not for me, I'm not going to fight them. I want to give them a platform that allows them to consume everything from us that they could possibly want to consume. But if they say, I just simply need to consume something else, I want that platform to still be able to say, all right, well, then we'll accommodate the thing you need, because that's going to make your life as my customer better. We also want to make sure we have an ecosystem of things that we can bring in, because we're not going to have everything. So whether that's a partnership with folks like Salesforce, or whether that's partners inside of our app boundary, we want to be able to give this solution to folks in a way that they can consume it in one interface, and also bring it along at a speed that makes sense for them. Because as you know, and I'll make this my last statement, oftentimes when people are putting in, say, a new voice platform, it's a nightmare to also at the exact same time try to put in 5 other WEM platforms. Oh, yeah. So being able to do it at a speed that makes sense, that allows people to consume it in a way that's going to allow them to set it up and not mess it up, it just makes sense. So that's the continued focus. And again, we're going to continue to make sure that we're looking across that entire landscape and say to ourselves, how can AI, whether that's traditional AI or generative AI, make this a better experience for whoever's touching this tool?
Spot on. Trent, bring us home. What's happening at Verint?
All right. So philosophically, Verint has always believed in the concept of WFM as a platform working cooperatively, that no data should be in a silo someplace, as Daryl was talking about, that you can't touch or use in a role meaningful way. So our open CCAS philosophy of what we're building is a multi-layered approach to bringing, like Robert was talking about, we'll offer you so many things that you can consume. We want to offer you all of that and allow you to do it at the speed of consumption that makes best sense to you. And open is the big word. So we know that you may have people that have a preference for a piece of technology that has been useful to them for a long time. We don't want to get in the way of that. We want to cooperate with it. We want to make our platform interoperate with telephony platforms and all sorts of CRM platforms and all sorts of other tools, yet bring all the data together in a way that you as a business person can go and ask the right questions, get the right answers as quickly as possible, infuse the platform with as much usable AI that's transparent to the agents and actually makes things easy for them as we can. So our mission is to keep 3 things in mind every time that we're touching anything. We start with, core AI platform in the center. That powers our bots, it powers applications, it powers our treatment of data. We use the interaction data that we have access to train those systems and make sure that if we're going to give you a bot, that bot actually does that job the way that you would expect it to. And then finally, make sure that the AI infused elements of that work well for the hands-on keyboard. If it's not useful, then no one will use it, and we won't want that to happen for you.
All right.
So lots to talk about there, but I'll leave it at that.
All right. I appreciate it. And at time, we have 2 minutes left in our hour. So I'm going to address just a couple of really quick things. We were able to answer some of the questions along the way. So thank you all for asking questions. We'll be reaching out to you with some swag and some prizes for you. I did promise to come back to Dimitri's question, and it's a massive question that probably deserves an entire afternoon of response. So I will give a 15-second response. And the question is, are there established industry standards or ethical guidelines for generative AI to address the challenges of accuracy and reliability and all that? And the answer is no, but there should be. And I think as there's the beginning of a framework around both a legal and an ethical standard around generative AI. And this is as we move the technology into a space where it's making decisions about humans, we want to infuse it with our moral and ethical guidelines that we've established as a human race. And so that's a big ask, and it's going to take some time. So with that, I know we are out of time. Thank you to our brilliant panelists, and thank you all for attending. We hope this was informative and hope you'll join us next time as Waterfield Tech continues this leadership series with industry experts. And until next time, keep innovating.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.